HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Decision Book, 50 Models for Strategic Thinking, Fully Revised Edition, by Mikael Krogerus and Roman Tschäppeler. Translated by Jenny Pining. Read by Timothy Andrés Pabon. Instructions for Use. Why we wrote this book. 9 years ago, we were struck by the sudden realization that we found it hard to make decisions. Not only big, life-changing decisions, but everyday ones, too. What to buy, what to wear, which music to download, what to order at the bar. So we went in search of models and methods that would help us to structure and classify, analyze and weigh up options. In other words, that would help us make decisions. The result of our research is the book that you have. We wrote it primarily for ourselves. We thought that a print run of 500 would be more than enough, but then it sold 1 million copies in 20 languages. Obviously, other people were dealing with the same problem. Over the years, we have received many useful suggestions of new models and had mistakes in the book pointed out to us. So, we decided to revise the decision book and to add some new decision-making theories. Why you should listen to this book. This book has been written for anyone who has to deal with people on a daily basis. Whether you are a teacher, a professor, a pilot, or a top manager, you will be confronted by the same questions time and again. How do I make the right decision? How can I motivate myself or my team? How can I change things? How can I work more efficiently? What you will find in this book. The 50 best decision-making models, well-known and not so well-known, that will help you tackle these questions are described in words and diagrams. Don't expect straight answers. Be prepared to be tested. Expect food for thought. How to use this book. The print version of this book is a workbook. In that version, you can copy out the models, fill them in, cross them out, and develop and improve them. Please refer to it if you'd like to see the visual accompaniments to what you'll soon hear. Whether you need to prepare for a presentation or carry out an annual performance review, whether a difficult decision lies ahead of you or a prolonged dispute is now behind you, whether you want to reassess your business idea or get to know yourself better, this book will guide you. What is a decision-making model? The models in this book fulfill the following criteria. They simplify. They do not embrace every aspect of reality, but only include those aspects that seem relevant. They sum up. They are executive summaries of complex interrelations. They are visual. Using images, they convey concepts that are difficult to explain in words. As mentioned, you can check out the print version of this book for the visuals. They are methods. They do not provide answers. They ask questions. Answers emerge once you have used the models, i.e., filled them out and worked with them. Why do we need decision-making models? When we encounter chaos, we seek ways to structure it, to see through it, or at least to gain an overview of it. Models help us to reduce the complexity of a situation by enabling us to dismiss most of it and concentrate on what is important. Critics like to point out that models do not reflect reality. That is true, but it is wrong to claim that they compel us to think in a prescribed way. Models do not define what or how we should think. They are the result of an active thought process. You can check out this book in the American or the European way. Americans tend toward a trial-and-error approach. They do something, fail, learn from this, acquire theories, and try again. If this approach suits you, start at the beginning with how to improve yourself. Europeans tend to begin by acquiring theories, then doing something. If they then fail, they analyze, improve, and repeat the attempt. If this approach is more your style, begin with how to understand yourself better later on. Each model is only as good as the person who uses it. How to improve yourself. The Eisenhower Matrix. How to work more efficiently. The U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower supposedly once said, "The most urgent decisions are rarely the most important ones." Eisenhower was considered a master of time management. For example, he had the ability to do everything as and when it needed to be done. With the Eisenhower method, you will learn to distinguish between what is important and what is urgent. Whatever the job that lands on your desk, begin by breaking it down according to the Eisenhower method, and then decide how to proceed. We often focus too strongly on the urgent and important field, on the things that have to be dealt with immediately. Ask yourself, when will I deal with the things that are important but not urgent? When will I take the time to deal with important tasks before they become urgent? This is the field for strategic, long-term decisions. Another method of organizing your time better is attributed to the multimillionaire Warren Buffett. Make a list of everything you want to get done today. Begin with a task at the top of the list and continue only when you have completed it. When a task has been completed, cross it off the list. Better late than never, but never late is better. The SWOT analysis. How to find the right solution. With SWOT analysis, you evaluate the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats identified in a project. The technique is based on a Stanford University study from the 1960s, which analyzed data from Fortune 500 companies. The study found a 35% discrepancy between the company's objectives and what was actually implemented. The problem was not that the employees were incompetent, but that the objectives were too ambiguous. Many employees didn't even know why they were doing what they were doing. SWOT was developed from the results of the study to help those involved in a project to gain a clearer understanding of it. It is worth taking the time to think about each step of the SWOT analysis rather than just hastily fill it out. How can we emphasize our strengths and compensate for or cover up our weaknesses? How can we maximize opportunities? How can we protect ourselves against threats? What is interesting about SWOT analysis is its versatility. It can be applied to business and personal decisions with equal success. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Gretchen Rubin. The BCG box. How to evaluate costs and benefits. In the 1970s, the Boston Consulting Group developed a method for assessing the value of the investments in a company's portfolio. The four-field matrix distinguishes between 4 different types of investment. Cash cows have a high market share but a low growth rate. This means they don't cost much but promise high returns. Consultant's verdict? Milk them. Stars have a high market share and a high growth rate, but growth devours money. The hope is that the stars will turn into cash cows. Consultant's verdict? Invest. Question marks, or problem children, have high growth potential but a low share of the market. With a lot of financial support and cajolement, they can be turned into stars. Consultant's verdict? A tough decision. Dogs are business units with a low share in a saturated market. Dogs should be held on to only if they have a value other than a financial one, e.g., a vanity project or favor for a friend. Consultant's verdict? Liquidate. The most dangerous words in investing are, "This time it's different." Sir John Templeton. The Project Portfolio Matrix. How to maintain an overview. Are you juggling several projects simultaneously? Then you are a slasher. The term was coined by the New York author Marcy Alboher and describes people who cannot give a single answer to the question, "And what do you do for a living?" Suppose you are a teacher or musician and/or web designer. The variety may be appealing, but how can you balance all these projects? And how do you ensure a regular income? To get an overview, you can classify your current projects, both work-related and private, with the help of the project portfolio matrix according to cost and time. Think of costs not only in terms of money, but also in terms of resources such as friends involved, energy, and psychological stress. Cost and time are just two examples. You can use whatever parameters are relevant to your situation. For example, the x-axis could be how much my project is helping me achieve my overriding objective, and the y-axis, how much am I learning from this project? Now position your projects in the matrix in relation to the two axes, objectives achieved and amount learned. How to interpret the results. Reject projects if there is nothing you can learn from them and if they do not correspond to your overriding vision. Projects that you can learn from but do not correspond to your vision are interesting, but will not help you achieve your objective. Try to change the project so that it serves your vision. If a project corresponds to your vision, but you are learning nothing new, look for somebody else to do it for you. If you are learning something and achieving your vision, you have hit the jackpot. Make sure you complete your projects properly, even those that aren't successful. The feedback analysis. How you can learn to evaluate your own work. What is your greatest strength? Most people think they know what they're good at, but they're usually wrong. So says Peter F. Drucker, one of the most important management thinkers of the last century. He came up with a simple yet clever technique for getting to know yourself better. Whenever you have an important decision to make, write down what you expect to happen. After a year, compare your expectation with the actual outcome. During his lifetime, Drucker continually compared his own expectations with the actual results. He learned to give himself feedback, and over time he began to recognize where and what kind of improvement was needed. Or to put it another way, he worked out where his strengths lay and where they didn't. Sounds easy? Calvinist ministers and Jesuit priests used this method as early as the mid-17th century, and according to some historians, the global impact of both religious orders is at least partially due to their use of feedback analysis and using this technique to manage themselves. Knowing what your strengths are is the most important thing an individual can know about himself or herself. Peter F. Drucker. The John Whitmore model. Am I pursuing the right goal? If you set yourself goals, you should distinguish between final goals and performance goals. A final goal might be, I want to run a marathon. A performance goal helps you achieve this aim. For example, I will go jogging for 30 minutes every morning. Write down your goal and check, step by step, whether it correlates with the 14 requirements in the model. A few things to note. If a goal is unattainable, there is no hope. And if it is not challenging, it will not motivate you. If the 14 steps are too complicated for you, keep in mind the following ground rule when establishing your goal. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. The greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. Michelangelo. The rubber band model. How to deal with a dilemma. Is this a situation you are familiar with? A friend, colleague, or client needs to make a decision that could irrevocably alter their future. For example, to change career, move to another city, or take early retirement. The arguments for and against are evenly balanced. How can you help them out of their dilemma? Copy out the rubber band model and ask the person to ask themselves, what is holding me? What is pulling me? At first glance, the method seems to be a simple variation of the conventional question, what are the pros and cons? The difference is that what is holding me and what is pulling me are positive questions and reflect a situation with two attractive alternatives. A peacefulness follows any decision, even the wrong one. Rita Mae Brown. The feedback box. Dealing with other people's compliments and criticisms. Feedback is one of the most difficult and sensitive processes in groups. It is easy to hurt people with criticism, but false compliments are also unhelpful. Compliments often make us too complacent, while criticism damages our self-esteem and can lead us to make unwise choices. The one-dimensional question, what did you find good, what did you find bad, is therefore not necessarily helpful. In terms of what can be learned from feedback, it is better to ask yourself, what can I do with this criticism? In other words, see what can stay as it is and what needs to change, but may have been good up till now. It is not only about working out what has not succeeded. It is also about deciding whether and how to react. The model will help you to categorize the feedback you receive in order to clearly establish a plan of action. It is also important to ask yourself honestly, which success or failure was in fact due to luck? Were you the winner of a match because the ball found its way into the net purely by chance? Do you really deserve this compliment? Pay attention to your thoughts because they become words. Pay attention to your words because they become actions. Pay attention to your actions because they become habits. Pay attention to your habits because they become your character. Pay attention to your character because it is your fate. From the Talmud. The yes-no rule. How to make a decision quickly. A good way to quickly reach a decision is to use the yes-no rule. It comes into its own when you have to weigh up risks but have little time. Take the example of somebody who goes to the doctor feeling ill. The doctor makes a diagnosis based on a process of elimination. Does he have a fever? Is his blood pressure too low? The yes-no rule is based on clear parameters, something that can be beneficial not only in medicine but also in management, private life, or politics. In 2013, U.S. President Barack Obama established 3 yes-no rules to reach a decision about drone strikes. Does the targeted person pose a persistent and immediate threat to the American people? Is the USA the only country that can deal with this threat? Will civilians almost certainly not be harmed? Only if all 3 questions could be answered with a yes was a drone strike approved. The oldest, shortest words, yes and no, are those that require the most thought. The choice overload. Why you should limit your options. Intuitively, you might think that more means more. The more options we take into consideration, the better our final decision. The more choices we have, the happier we are. But sometimes the opposite is true. The greater the choice, the higher our expectations, and the more we worry that we will make the wrong decision. It is the so-called paradox of choice that the American business professor Sheena Iyengar demonstrated in a legendary experiment. In a supermarket, she offered a variety of jams for shoppers to try, 6 different varieties on one day, 24 varieties on another. With the smaller selection, 40% tried the jams, and 30% bought a jar. The bigger selection attracted 60% of the shoppers, but only 2% bought a jar of jam. The conclusion? Choice is alluring, but confusing. How do we solve this paradox of choice in our day-to-day lives? The psychology professor Barry Schwartz has a simple recommendation. Reduce your choice. For example, in a restaurant, pick the first dish on the menu that you like the look of, and then immediately close the menu, because the more options you juggle in your mind, the more dissatisfied you will be. More is difficult. The gap in the market model. How to recognize a bankable idea. The goal of every new business is to discover and occupy a gap in the market. But what is the best way of proceeding? The gap in the market model helps by depicting a market in a clear, three-dimensional way. Draw 3 axes that measure the development of your market, your customers, and your future products. Say that you want to open a new cafe. Position your competitors on the graph according to the following criteria. X-axis, location, how much foot traffic does this street get? Y-axis, price, how expensive is the coffee? Z-axis, cool factor, how popular is the cafe? In areas that are dense with competitors, you should enter the market with your business model only if it has the potential to be a category killer. For example, by elevating coffee drinking from an ordinary, everyday habit to a premium experience, Starbucks became a category killer and the benchmark for all other market players. Look for a niche, an area that has been overlooked and that is not yet occupied. Beware, if nobody else is in that area, you should check if there is any demand in the first place. Positioning is like drilling for oil. Close is not good enough. The morphological box and scamper. Why you have to be structured to be creative. Innovation can mean doing something completely new, but it can also mean making a new combination of things that already exist. But how is this achieved? The concept of morphology stems from the study of biological structures and configurations. In the 1930s, the Swiss physicist Fritz Zwicky at the Institute of Technology in California developed a problem-solving method using what he called morphological boxes, in which a new entity is developed by combining the attributes of a variety of existing entities. This method, which was initially applied by Zwicky to jet engine technology, also began to be used in marketing strategies and the development of new ideas. How it works. For the development of a new car, for example, all the relevant parameters, such as vehicle type, target group, are noted, and as many attributes as possible are ascribed to each parameter. This requires expertise as well as imagination, as the aim is to create something new out of something that already exists. The result of this method is a table. A morphological box can have up to 4 dimensions. The next stage requires brainstorming. The car has to be an SUV, say, but it also needs to be energy efficient and inexpensive to manufacture. Which attributes match these requirements? Connect your chosen attributes with a line. This gives you an overview of your priorities. Ask yourself, could these attributes form the basis of a new car design? Or do you have to abandon some of them or add new ones? Besides the morphological box, the Scamper checklist developed by Bob Eberly will also help you to reconfigure an existing idea or product. The following 7 key questions are drawn from a questionnaire developed by Alex Osborne, founder of the advertising agency BBDO. Substitute. Substitute people, components, materials. Combine. Combine with other functions or things. Adapt. Adapt functions or visual appearance. Modify. Modify the size, shape, texture, or acoustics. Put to other use. Other new combined uses. Eliminate. Reduce, simplify, eliminate anything superfluous. Reverse. Use conversely. Invert. Reverse. The task is not so much to see what no one has yet seen, but to think what nobody yet has thought about that which everybody sees. Arthur Schopenhauer. The gift model. How much to spend on presents? Gift-giving is something of a minefield. A cheap or impersonal gift can make the recipient feel undervalued and create an awkward situation for both giver and receiver. Our highly unscientific little model has 2 axes. How expensive is the gift? How valued is it? 2 rules of thumb. Being generous beats being miserly. Don't be misled by the sentence, "That really wasn't necessary." The gift of an experience beats a material gift. I have the simplest tastes. I am always satisfied with the best. Oscar Wilde. Thinking outside the box. How to come up with brilliant ideas. A really innovative idea, rather than an old idea that has been applied to a new context or a variation of an existing idea, is rare. Innovative ideas usually emerge when we leave our comfort zone or when we break the rules. The example used here is the 9-point problem, which first appeared in puzzle magazines at the beginning of the 20th century. The task: connect the 9 points using a maximum of 4 straight lines without lifting your pen from the paper. The solution? The trick is to extend the lines outside the box. This puzzle is often used as an example of creative thinking. But don't jump to any rash conclusions, because Dr. Peter Sudfeld, a professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia, made an interesting observation. He developed the restricted environmental stimulation technique, REST, which involves a person spending time in a darkened room with no visual or auditory stimulation. Sudfeld noticed that the subjects of the experiment didn't go mad. On the contrary, their blood pressure went down, their mood improved, and they became more creative. A person who wants to think outside the box is better off thinking inside a box. The consequences model. Why it is important to make decisions promptly. We are often forced to make decisions based on limited or ambiguous information. At the beginning of a project, for example, when the finer details have yet to be clarified, we need to be bold in our decision-making, particularly because these early decisions have the most far-reaching consequences. Toward the end of a project, we know more and have fewer doubts, but by then there is no longer anything fundamental to decide. The most important question, then, is how we can bridge the chasm between doubt and decision. Beware. We often defer decisions because we have doubts, but not making a decision is a decision in itself. If you delay a resolution, it is often an unconscious decision, one that you do not communicate. This leads to uncertainty in a team, so if you want to make a decision later, be sure to communicate this clearly. With this model, the Danish organization theorists Christian Kreiner and Søren Christensen encourage us to be courageous and make decisions based on minimal information. I'd rather regret the things I have done than the things that I haven't. Lucille Ball. The theory of unconscious thinking. How to make decisions intuitively. It is tempting to believe that good decisions are the result of systematically thinking things through, and indeed, if the decision is a relatively straightforward one, impartially weighing up the pros and cons is likely to lead to the right outcome. However, if the decision is more complex and there doesn't seem to be an obvious answer, it is worth taking a break from thinking. Rather than trying to rationally weigh up all the arguments and information, trust your intuition. That may sound paradoxical, but the unconscious is better at sifting through large amounts of data. But how do you turn off the rational side of your brain? The psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer suggests the following intriguingly simple trick. If you can't decide between 2 options, toss a coin. While it is spinning in the air, you will probably sense which side you want to land face up. You then don't even need to look at the actual result. The idea is to switch off the rational side of your brain and get in touch directly with your innermost desires and experiences. Intuition is knowledge that we feel but cannot explain. The stop rule. When you should rethink a decision. In their excellent book, Simple Rules, Kathleen
Sample complete. Ready to continue?